Hello guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about some bodybuilding advice that needs to stop. I've been told that we have a few seconds before we can actually use the word bullshit before we get demonetized. So there we go. Anyway, we've got a list of a few things here which we're going to talk about, which are perhaps quite controversial, but just be assured that we have come to these conclusions from our own experience, our best knowledge, and the scientific evidence that we have at hand. So it's not a case of us just being looking at data, looking at numbers on a screen, saying this works, this doesn't. This is based on our best information that we have from everything we've understood and experienced over a combined probably 25, 30 years, maybe even longer. So this is not just a nonchalant response. Anyway, getting to the point. The first thing I want to discuss today is the 6+ meals per day phenomenon. And this is something that's been happening for years and years and years. Perhaps even say maybe since, I don't know, maybe 70s, maybe 80s, maybe before. And the idea is we have 6 meals per day, multiple feedings, to make use of more protein and have more muscle protein synthesis. What are your thoughts towards that, Drew?
Yeah, in my experience, I don't see any significant difference between 1 or 2 meals a day versus 6+. And I've had competitions in the past where I've had upwards of even like 12 or 13 feedings. And I know we'll get to pre and post workout nutrition in a bit, but I used to really structure one meal an hour before my workout, something, a shake during my workout, and stuff, every 30 minutes or so after my workout. And in hindsight now, I just don't think you need that much. And in a lot of ways, it can be really uncomfortable just constantly feeding. What's your experience been like?
That's a good point, sir. My experience is that I have tried up to 7 meals per day at one point. The time I was taking in, if we're using calories here, guys, about 6.5, 7,000 calories per day, something like that. Did it work to improve my digestion? No, not noticeably. I felt like crap. I felt inflamed, and I felt horrible, heavy, overweight. Not great. I felt sick all the time. Digestion was awful. So it didn't improve anything there. Saying that, now I'm on roughly 4 meals per day, sometimes 3, but usually 4. I feel better. Now, saying that, we do not need more than 1 meal per day, but in some cases it is more feasible because we have a high food intake to have each day. That means you'll need more meals. Now, saying that, is there much benefit to multiple meals? It depends. It's very caveated, nuanced experience that you're going to have. So for me, I digest food better if I split it up. For me, having one meal of 250 protein and over 300 grams of fat is insane. It's a lot of food. It's not something I'd enjoy doing. It's basically having an eating contest every single day, once a day, when you're eating that much food. So ill-advised. You can do it. Not to say some people won't have a different experience, but for me, it's a no-go. We don't need that many meals. The research that does exist, which is apparent and is accessible online, which everyone can access, suggests something like 4 to perhaps maybe 5 meals per day will maximize muscle protein synthesis. But that amount is not significantly different in terms of the net gain, in terms of muscle mass that someone might have over 1 or 2 meals per day. We have what you call a spike and a valley in terms of muscle protein synthesis. We cannot spike it throughout the whole day. At the same time, we can spike it once but have a longer spike. So, you're not going to get all the results you want if you're thinking you're going to get more and more meals in. So for that in mind, 4 meals per day works good for me. Anyone that's interested in the research around that, it's by Don Layman. He is, in my opinion, the pinnacle in terms of protein intake research online. Everything that he's written out, it does make sense, is scientific, and it is apparent in the literature. So next point is on high carbs for energy. So we know that carbohydrates release glucose, or sometimes they are glucose, just Haribo, things like that, near enough. We can use them as a fuel substrate. Now, are there problems around that? Yes. Jerome, what are a few things that you think are problems around using carbohydrates for energy?
Sure. Very acutely, just high blood sugar, inflammation, which can cause appetite, headaches, slight changes in mood. We really don't need carbohydrates to fuel our workouts. And bodybuilding workouts are not as demanding as a lot of people would think in like an endurance context. Jonathan and I have talked before how most of the time that people spend in the gym is actually either resting between sets or setting up equipment for the next exercise. And if you were to look at the actual amount of time that people spend lifting or lowering weights, it's very, very brief. And carbohydrates are not an integral part of that. So there's very little, if any, benefit to high amounts of carbohydrates and significant potential damage acutely and chronically that you can be doing to your body by prolonged high dietary intake of carbs. What do you think?
That's a good point. Yeah, first thing that comes to mind in terms of high carbs for energy is that we're missing the most obvious energy substrate we have, which we actually hold in our body at all times. It's estimated around 100,000 calories are on our bodies at any given time for an average adult male. So that's a big enough fuel source for me. Do we need to dip into that? Yeah. Is it more helpful? Yeah. Is it a larger store? Yeah. So having carbohydrates in the diet increases inflammation, as Jerome said, reduces insulin sensitivity. It can lead to carbohydrate intolerance, which the people also cause they call it insulin resistance, or also type 2 diabetes, which does happen. Pancreas does run out of the ability to excrete endogenous insulin, so we don't want to be doing that, guys. We have fat, less inflammatory, lower deuterium, loads of other things come into it, so not indicated as helpful. Now this brings us on to our next point, which is quite closely linked. The carbs pre and post workout. What do you think towards that?
Yeah, this is a really kind of old school, early 2000s idea that, at least when I was doing contest preps in the past, I would have almost all of my carbs for the entire day right before and within 3 hours after my workout. And to hit the carb requirements, I was adding just scoops of dextrose to pre and post workout shakes, and then having lots of chicken and rice after a workout. And when I was following these guidelines, because this is what my mentors did, I always remember going to the gym feeling like I have a rock in my stomach, and I just didn't feel good going to the gym. And I didn't feel good eating all of that rice and all of those carbs after my workout. But I remember thinking, okay, like I get superficially what they're going for. If you eat a lot of carbs, it spikes your insulin. That insulin is going to shunt some of your pre and post workout protein into the muscles faster. It's going to allow for better recovery. I get that, but I just don't feel good doing it. And this is a myth that still continues to be quite prevalent, that you should have your carbs pre and post workout. Pre, so you have energy for your workout, and post to facilitate the uptake of protein, amino acids, and other essential nutrients to start fueling muscle recovery and growth. And when I switched to carnivore, I had zero decline in performance, and I'm stronger. And according to body composition tests, I have more muscle now than I've ever had in the past with zero carbohydrate. What about you?
That's a great point. I think the biggest thing for me is, what does carbohydrate do? Turns to glucose. What does that need our body to require to deal with that? It needs insulin. What does insulin do? It lowers cortisol. So by having lower cortisol, we have less stress hormones. So in essence, yes, our workout will be less stressful by having carbohydrates around the workout. Problem is we have less adrenaline, which means we're not able to lift as much because we don't have that innate drive. That's when people then take caffeine to match and simulate that innate drive, which doesn't really work because it just attacks the adrenal systems. Your best bet in terms of your workout, pre and post, intra, is to maximize what your body's already doing. Our bodies have got here for hundreds of thousands of years for doing exactly that. We haven't needed intra-workout powders and drinks to chase down a woolly mammoth. Can you imagine that, guys? Having a swig some, I don't know, Celtic or something just to get a woolly mammoth is insane. The other obvious point as well is the rest and digest aspect of it. Carbohydrates, they do tend to swell your stomach in a lot of cases if you're having potatoes, rice, things like that. That is quite taxing on the digestive system, especially if you're having it intra-workout. Again, insulin will rise, more blood will go to your digestive system, so your training performance will be worse. Now, some people will say, I train better when I add in carbs pre and post workout and sometimes intra-workout. They're obviously not fat adapted. They oftentimes are addicted to sugar. They won't actually admit that. They like having Haribo around the gym sessions. I used to do the same thing. It would be a hard task to get people to understand that they do not need these things, honestly. But we're coming from experience here. And people will say, Mike O'Hearn, for example, he has carbohydrates around the workout, or he's vegan or plant-based, or he does this, that, and the other. These guys are extreme examples. Oftentimes they didn't build their physiques using that sort of methodology, and they have health tolerability, basically, that allows them to do these things without too much suffering. And these are extreme examples. Just because a pro bodybuilder does something, or someone that's a fitness influencer does something and it seems to work for them, it does not mean it lies parallel to what everyone else can do and perform. So, that's not a fair argument to say that a pro bodybuilder does something. We're speaking from experience from, two guys on the internet talking about bodybuilding with or without carbs over a long period of time. We don't need them. My performance has not been better because of adding in carbs. I've never actually eaten a carbohydrate and felt better afterwards ever in my life. Except when I'm really hungry and I've got no other substrate in my body because I'm 4% body fat. Anything tastes good at 4% body fat.
Yeah.
You feel better as well. But we're talking here about building muscle, and the average person's going to go to the gym and be a bodybuilder. So, not ideal. The next topic, green powders for micronutrients. What can you tell me about that, Drew?
Yeah, I would have massive, massive concerns consuming any kind of greens. First of all, if you're eating a species-appropriate diet, you're going to get all of the macro and micronutrient needs just within your, 1 to maybe 4 meals a day, eating animal fats and meat. My concern is there's a lot of oxalates, phytates, lectins, and other anti-nutrients inside of plant compounds, and to take something that is already really high in substances like that and make a concentrated form of it and then consume that in mass, for some people is going to be extremely dangerous. There's a myriad of studies of people online. You can do a quick Google search and find people that have put themselves in the hospital because of slamming, kale and spinach smoothies. They've basically just overloaded their system with oxalates. So the idea of taking greens for micronutrients when in actuality, you're probably just putting a lot of stress on your kidneys and other parts of your body is crazy to me. What about you?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. People will probably watch this and think, what are anti-nutrients? What is oxalates? What are these things? These are things that we don't need. Anti-nutrients. They actually take nutrition from us. So they're not indicated, they're not helpful. They actually provide a net negative, effectively. People argue you need vitamin C, polyphenols, various vitamin E compounds, things like that. We can get all that we need through our carnivore diet, which is an animal-based or animal food diet, which is animal fat and animal protein. When you start putting these things in the system, you'll notice that you go to the toilet more. That tells me a thing or two about your digestive system and how ineffective it is at assimilating micronutrients. So, not ideal. People will often say it's to cover bases. If someone is eating, for example, 6,000 supposed calories on a diet, we're trying to give you guys terminology that you might understand. So we don't use calories typically, it's usually macronutrients, but calories, 6,000 calories per day. And you're telling me that you need to have a greens powder for more micronutrients. What is wrong with the food that you're currently eating, which provides so much net energy value and significance to your diet, that is lacking these micronutrients? You're missing something here. So not ideal. And oftentimes actually this actually brings us to the next point, which is chugging water. We can go around this as a whole topic probably for hours, but I'll just go into the point where people have greens powders, and oftentimes they'll drink a litre or two in the morning of water, add in apple cider vinegar, things like that. I'll just say very briefly, I'm not a fan. I think we should drink to first, salt to taste, and all that sort of thing. Very simple things our body has adapted to understand what hunger signals are, assuming we're following the right diet. What happens when we drink too much water? We go for a piss, a lot more. What happens when we go for a piss? We lose nutrition. We lose electrolytes. Our body's trying to maintain a homeostatic range. It becomes a diuretic effect, basically. So we should not be doing things like this. Now, people will make the argument that we need more water after an overnight fast because we've lost sweat overnight, which I understand. In which case, I might argue that someone might just be more fat adapted to produce deuterium depleted water, which will happen when someone is eating enough fat in their diet, also with a lower insulin level, so the low carbohydrate intake as well. So not indicated if you're following a proper diet. So have you had experience about that? So have you heard of people drinking like 2 litres in the morning?
Yeah, I know a number of people that are constantly drinking water, and the body doesn't utilize anything beyond need. That it has to either store it somehow or eliminate it. So thinking, anthropologically and evolutionarily as a species, like we wouldn't have had constant access to fresh water most of the time. That's why we have that mechanism of thirst. So it's an indication that we need water, and then we drink until that need has been satiated, and then we're good. But the number of people that I know that are constantly pounding water that will have headaches or other issues, like you said, they don't realize that when you eliminate that water, you're losing electrolytes. You're losing calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. You're losing essentially whatever was in your blood, um, to some extent. And if you don't replenish that, then you're not going to feel good. So people I know that drink extremely high amounts of water, I recommend they add just a little bit of salt and maybe some potassium into their water, and that usually makes them feel a lot better. But um, like I said, the body doesn't utilize anything beyond need. And anything you give it more than what it needs at that time, it's either it has to store or it has to get rid of it. So um, pounding uh, exceedingly large amounts of water is definitely acutely detrimental to health.
Yeah, completely agree. People think it's cleansing the kidneys. In fact, it's actually causing filtration issues.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to our point about the carbohydrates. The more carbs we eat, typically the more salt we'll also eat.
Mhm.
More sodium will increase first if we're eating too much salt beyond what we actually need to perform work and energy. Energy, sort of, what's the word? Exercise that requires a lot of energy, so it's not ideal.
Mhm.
Next is a point on excess cardio, which is very, 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 very common. Often seeming, see a lot of women in the fitness space doing like an hour or two of cardio a day. And they'll be quite lean, yeah. They'll also be ravenous.
Mhm.
They'll have an eating disorder, which is extremely common. I'd say it's more the norm than not, my experience. And how do I know that? Whenever they compete, whenever they reach a goal of some kind, whenever they reach a certain body fat goal, they'll go out and get fast food. They'll buy cookies. It's oftentimes that I go to a fitness exhibition and everyone's walking around selling donuts in a fitness exhibition, guys.
Yep.
There is definitely a issue with the fitness industry right now. They are definitely promoting bad health. Fitness and health are not the same thing. Fitness is the ability to produce a physical outcome, depending on what that is, at a high level.
Mhm.
Health is not the same thing. Health is having good blood markers, feeling good, well-being, is effectively, things like that. So don't get the two things mixed up. And what I'd say about cardio is we do too much. Shouldn't really do any, ideally. I like to either walk or sprint. I can currently only walk just about. So sprinting's out of the question. But if I could, had the energy to do it, and I wanted to increase my heart rate and get fitter, that would be sprinting. It'd be on a low impact exercise, cross trainer, elliptical, a bike, something like that. Are there any other thoughts about cardio? Maybe the heart risks and things like that.
Yeah, if people haven't seen it, I would highly recommend they watch your video that you did with Bart K on left ventricular hypertrophy as a result of prolonged and constant and continuous amounts of zone 2 type cardio. It was an excellent video, and I can't even hope to recapitulate the excellent points that you guys made. So people should definitely watch that video. But we see people that are constantly going to the gym 4 or 5 nights a week, 45 to 60 minutes of moderate effort cardio, and they never experience any significant changes in their body composition. Now, if somebody does that because it helps them feel mentally and emotionally better, then fine, I wouldn't take that away from them. But in terms of changing body composition, Jonathan's right. It's going to increase your appetite. And if the research by Herman Poncer has any modicum of truth to it, then we found that the body has kind of an adaptive response to physical activity that will slow our metabolic rate to account for the additional energy expenditure performed through physical activity. So doing large or moderate amounts of cardio is going to make you more hungry, and it's going to slow your metabolism, and it's essentially going to have a net effect, but in a lot of ways, it's going to make it harder to lose weight. I think that the average person can get in really decent shape, in terms of overall health and aesthetics without doing any conventional cardio at all. And cardio is something that Jonathan and I will sprinkle in towards the tail end of a bodybuilding competition when we're trying to get those last little bits of fat off. But even then, it's generally more of the very low duration, ultra high intensity kind of sprints or intervals. Um, just trying to get that last little bit of fat off. But most people are probably best not doing large bouts of moderate intensity cardio.
You want to re-stress the point. People that do these things, they end up looking the same year after year. People throw studies at us and say, you know, this is what this says. When you combine cardio with weights, it does this. Yeah, but it's chasing the dragon. It causes more issues than it solves. Long-term bodybuilding, health outcomes, and reaching your goals itself, you're going to make that a lot better by doing appropriate cardio. And if you're going to do cardio, guys, of any capacity, if you can, do it outside in the sun.
Yep.
That's what I highly suggest to people. It's also more pleasant as well, you know, rather than staring at a screen, which is dull. This kind of brings us to the next point, which is very, very similar actually. It's the more is better idea. So I was actually watching a video actually yesterday by Rich Piana about, I think it was an 8-hour arm workout, and he was saying, you know, I'm going to try this, I'm going to drink a shake between each hour or something, and I'm going to do more and more work, and the more you do, the better you get. One thing about bodybuilders and fitness people is generally they're insane, as Professor Bart K rightly says, and I think he is correct. They will do anything to reach their goals. Not necessarily a bad thing, but they'll also just do more and more and more, and they'll not see that they're damaging their health as a result of it. There's a few ideas I have around here, but I'll probably just leave it to Jerome for this little segment.
Yeah, I would say that exercise is a physical stress on the body. And because it's a physical stress, there is a finite limit with how much the body can tolerate and then how much time it needs to actually recover from that physical stress. So the endless imposition of physical stress upon the body will only be productive to a certain point. And then past that definitive point, it's going to be a detriment to your health. So Mike Mentzer in the 70s and 80s said, more is not better, precise is best. And another one of my mentors says, more isn't better, better is better. So in a lot of ways, like Jonathan and I will promote a minimal effective dose of exercise. We wanted to give the exact amount of exercise that gives the best overall degree of stimulus, and then you have to let the body recover from that.
Yeah, well said. This is definitely something we could probably do a separate topic on at some point, different video. Next is the very high protein levels that people take in. For most of my training career, I've been training now for like 15 years or so, I'd say the guidance has been 1 gram per pound of body weight. My brother actually I actually explained this to my brother maybe a week or two ago. I said, why are we measuring it this way? If someone's 30% body fat or they're 8% body fat, how is their protein intake based on their weight going to be the same? You have fat on your body or more protein, muscle mass. You should align the biological macronutrient itself with what you're trying to put in to build whatever tissue that is. Protein builds muscle tissue, it doesn't build fat. So we shouldn't be doing it that way. I think what we might define as a very high protein level is something like maybe 1.5 grams per pound of body weight. That's when I see people having issues with the digestive system. Although protein is good and it helps you do lots of different things, provides vitamins, minerals, repairs tissues, creates enzymes, hormones, all sorts of things, neurotransmitters. Although it does do these things, we don't need more than what we need. Again, it goes back to the point, more is not actually better. We have an exact requirement. How do we know that? We have hunger signals which tell us we've eaten too much or too little. Our jaw might start to ache, we might be bloated, we might have distended gut, we might have a slow digestive system, we might be really thirsty. Too much protein does have a mild diuretic effect itself. We might salt our food more, which means we're then drinking more water. So all these things come into it, guys. It's not just water and food are separate, they come together. Water is a macronutrient. It's one of the 4 macronutrients that we can take in. So we don't want to be thinking that these things are separate. And again, like I said, it aligns well with what we take in through food. So, I mean, what sort of guidelines would you give, Jerome, for people that are asking about protein intakes and things like that?
Yeah, I generally base it, and especially if someone's, like you mentioned, about 30% body fat, I'm much more likely to give a protein recommendation based on kind of goal body weights or um, lean body mass or fat-free mass. There's a couple of things that go into that. But the issue that I have with high protein is I know a lot of guys that are first getting into bodybuilding will read how a lot of pro bodybuilders are consuming 300, 400, 500 plus grams of protein a day. And even if they are, again, pro bodybuilders, one, they hit the genetic jackpot and they're enhanced and they're also working a lot harder than most people in the gym. So I understand how their requirements may be higher and would even grant, some of the smaller ends of those amounts. But for the average guy that's going to the gym that just wants to put some muscle on, that thinks he needs to be eating 400 or 500 grams a day, I used to eat and do contest preps where 40 to 50% of my total calories were coming from protein. And I was eating 300 plus grams of protein a day. And like you said, more is not better. The body doesn't utilize anything extra beyond its need. When it comes to protein, if you're consuming protein beyond what your body needs, there's a couple different things that can happen. It can be converted into glucose, and excess glucose will then be converted into fat. It can be deaminated, and the liver will just excrete a lot of the amino acids that we no longer need. But you're right, there's a very finite limit to how much protein we actually need in a day. And I think for most people, the general recommendations of right around 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass is going to be a good starting point for most people. And for most individuals, that'll probably be between 100 grams to 200 grams of protein a day. And then you can always fine tune things. But people that just want to build a little bit of muscle don't need 3, 4, 500 plus grams of protein a day. A lot of that is just being wasted. And protein is the most expensive macronutrient. So in a lot of ways, you're wasting money by consuming that much protein.
Yeah, well said. It might be useful to give people some guidelines here on this as well. So I know you mentioned the grammages. The grammage that I like to use is 1.75 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass. It works out about the same as what Jerome said, pretty much. Another measurement that people use is 1 gram per centimeter of height. Now, these aren't hard and fast rules. These aren't what people have to eat. We're not trying to tell people to be robotic. We should listen to our hunger signals, our recovery metrics as well. Are we getting better or not? What is the reason why? This is all important, and kind of has helped. It's helpful to have a coach that knows what we're talking about, like Jerome or myself, to outline how and why you should measure these things and what your best tools are to understand what you need. So yeah, very well said. Next is the point that made me laugh a little bit. So it's, we're all going to make it. What does that mean, Jerome?
Yeah, so it's the idea that we're all going to hit our goals. And when I first got into strength training, I had this naive idea that like I was never going to take drugs and I could still get every bit as big and aesthetic as anybody in the world if I was willing to work hard enough, do the right routine that fits with my body, find the right diet, and if I get everything dialed in just perfectly, and if I work my ass off and I work harder than the next person, I can be every bit as big. I can shape my muscles exactly how I want them. Schwarzenegger gave an analogy in Pumping Iron to where bodybuilders have the mindset of a sculptor, and in a way, that's true. But it was ignorant of the fact that people have genetic limitations, and some people just have very small frames and aren't endowed with the genetic gifts required to build an abundance of muscle mass. And the fitness industry can be somewhat predatory on these individuals because it keeps selling the idea that everybody can build a 20-inch arm or 30-inch legs if you're just willing to buy the right supplements, train with the right ab widgets and gadgets and all of that crap, and just work hard enough. And for most people, like 99% of the population does not have it in them to compete at a moderately high level on the bodybuilding stage.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Like an example of this is me and my brother. We both reached what you might call a genetic ceiling in terms of our natural bodybuilding musculature over a very, very, very short period of time. Now, how much of that was biological versus psychological? We're both very hardworking people. We're very disciplined. We believe in sticking to rules to reach our goals. We have clear objectives. Sometimes people that perhaps more scatty-minded, not as specific with their goals, they might, be on a sort of want to gain a bit of muscle, lose a bit of fat, get, all these sort of up and downs. Once we have a goal, we stick to it. I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. We're not all going to make it, guys. We're not all going to get there. We can always get better, though. That's one thing we always emphasise. You can get better. So it's not, you're not limited on what you can achieve. But it might be a lot harder for some of you. Next is a bit of a controversial one, because we understand a lot of people watching this might have different views to us. So we're going to give our best ideas about it. So this is test boosters. So anything which improves testosterone levels. I'd say the first thing, of course, is that if you're going to use exogenous hormones, they'll produce a better outcome than trying to boost your own natural levels. So I don't want to be seen here as a bit of a liar or someone that's not telling the truth. That is the best case scenario. However, not for a lot of people, it's not going to be the most helpful scenario. We should aim to optimize our natural levels, and that's going to be the first and foremost priority, especially someone on a carnivore bodybuilding diet. So, Jerome, have you had much experience with testosterone boosters in the past?
Yeah, I think in my early days of bodybuilding, 18 to 25 or so, I've tried a bunch of supplements. I never noticed a difference. I remember even back then they were quite expensive. And looking back at it now, if there was an over the counter testosterone booster, some powder, some drink that you could have that would have a significant improvement on testosterone levels to the point where it would greatly impact the amount of muscle mass that you would be able to build, there would be some kind of backlash in your own endocrinological system. So the body carefully regulates and has positive and negative feedback loops for every single hormone in the body. And if one goes up or if one goes down, there are multiple pathways that are affected, and other hormones will respond to that in different ways. Um, so if there was something over the counter that could drastically raise testosterone, well, it would probably drastically raise estrogen too. It would impact your FSH and LH. It would have other downstream side effects, and essentially, it would be the equivalent of taking a small amount of anabolics, which would shut down your natural testosterone production, and you would be dependent on this over the counter substance essentially for your entire life. Um, and it's just not that profound. The studies that back up a lot of these testosterone boosters show small amounts at best. And when you really look into the studies, sometimes you'll see things like it improved, testosterone by 20, 30, 40%. But if the average guy has a morning testosterone release of something like, it's slight, for most people, it's like 7 to 10 milligrams every single morning. So if your cohort goes from like 6 or 7 milligrams a day to 8. Well, if you go from 6 to 8, you're like, well, holy shit, I just improved my testosterone by, almost 30%. But that's not enough that would have a profound effect on your physique or your ability to achieve your goals in the gym.
I really like that point. Yeah, there's always a myriad of different hormones that come into play. So people will talk about, for example, famous carnivore influencer Sean Baker. He has low testosterone levels if you're going to measure them, apparently, based on whatever his last test was. However, he's a giant. He has a lot of muscle mass. He's pretty lean, performs at a very high level. That just goes to show, guys, what your body does with different hormones is different depending on your genetics and other factors. Just chasing one number is not the best case scenario. Very seldom do I see bodybuilders now just using testosterone. It's often a myriad of different drugs to expedite their results. So looking at one number through one test booster that probably doesn't even work is not going to be the most useful thing. So not ideal. As well, are these things actually containing the amounts of ingredients that they say they are? And as well, do you need these things if you're eating a proper diet and you have a lifestyle which is most impactful to improve your testosterone levels? Unless you're sure of those things, you shouldn't be wasting your money on maybe $50, $60, $70 per month on these things. I think this sort of investment is better used towards a consultation with myself or Jerome to improve your own testosterone levels. If you're not sure what to do, you're stuck, you're thinking, oh, I don't know what's going on here. My testosterone levels are low, I've tried everything. You probably haven't, guys. You probably sincerely have not. I speak to a lot of people, and it is very easy to unpack and pick apart what they're doing wrong in a given day. And oftentimes it's the most simplest thing, like they're not sleeping. Then they just need someone to tell them, you're not sleeping properly. You're staring at the screens until 11 o'clock at night. So that could be a massive thing to them. It might be the one thing that just turns that cog, and all of a sudden their testosterone levels go back to a normal range. So lots to unpack here. I think that's everything, Jerome. Unless you want to cover anything else.
No, this was a blast. I appreciate you accommodating my schedule. I had a client this morning, and Jonathan was kind enough to work around that. So I couldn't. You're 100% right. The amount of money that some people could save by skipping on some of these supplements, put that into a consultation, get your consultation, and then take that extra money that you're saving every month and put it towards high quality food. Every single cell of our body eventually is replaced by the food that we're eating. So save that money, buy some quality steak, some animal fat, some eggs, And that's going to be a lot better than any supplement you can buy over the counter.
Well said. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit like, leave a pleasant comment. Don't leave nasty ones, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.